During this last plenary session before the summer recess, the European Parliament voted to approve the implementation of the EU's new diplomatic service. Its creation was one of the biggest changes brought about by the Lisbon Treaty, and MEPs gave the green light to a blueprint for the service's structure and management.
The European External Action Service, or EEAS as it's known, will help to project the EU's foreign policy and coordinate its diplomacy around the world. In the past few months, the structure and management of the service have been hotly debated by the Council, Commission and, of course, Parliament. But a compromise deal has been reached, and this week MEPs approved that deal. The Parliament emerges with important new oversight and scrutiny powers, especially as regards the budget and the approval of senior officials in the service. The EEAS will combine officials from the Council, Commission and also national diplomats seconded from member states. Furthermore, national parliamentarians will also be involved in scrutinising aspects of the service's work, especially missions carried out under the banner of the Common Security and Defence Policy. EPP member Elmar Brok, the Parliament's rapporteur on this matter, also successfully fought to give the Commission more influence in the establishment and management of the service.
It's very much important that we strengthened more the role of the commissioners in this service as the Commission herself did. And I think this is very much important, so that in the future the High Representative can be deputized by commissioners, not just in community matters but also in mixed matters, so that we have a clearer control with political responsibility in this service.
The Brok report was approved by an overwhelming majority, which means the service should be operational by the end of this year.
Over 10 years ago, the European Parliament warned member states that liberalising financial markets without at the same time developing European supervision mechanisms would end in a crisis of the financial system. The reason was simple. In an open European market, the activities of financial institutions can no longer be controlled by authorities whose power is limited by national borders.
EU governments didn't follow this advice, and both complex and exotic financial products started to inundate the financial markets. Now, 10 years later, a financial crisis has taken hold. The result is a credit crunch. Nobody trusts anybody, and loans to companies and SMEs have stopped. The crisis resulted in 23 million unemployed in Europe, and 3.5 billion euros, that is 1/3 of the EU's GDP, has been given in public aid to avoid the collapse of financial institutions. So, what to do now?
We will only overcome the crisis when trust and transparency come back to the financial markets, to the institutions and to the financial products they produce. And this will be only possible when we have real and credible European supervision authorities, strong, independent and democratically controlled. Authorities that are not limited to reiterating the mottos coming from their national governments.
EPP member José Manuel García Margallo, Vice President of the Parliament's Economic Affairs Committee, is responsible for negotiations with EU finance ministers on the legislative proposals to build up a real European financial supervision system. He has managed to get the support of the main political groups in Parliament for putting in place strong European authorities with far-reaching and independent powers to control banks, financial markets, pension funds and insurance. His proposals also include the creation of a fund financed by banks to avoid new cases of taxpayers footing the bill for further collapses of big financial entities. In other words, Main Street will not pay for the excesses of Wall Street. Support for Margallo's amendments to the legislative proposals was near unanimous in plenary. Nevertheless, MEPs decided not to vote on the whole package, so time could be left for reaching agreement with EU finance ministers after the summer recess.
The Council has asked for time, Parliament has agreed, but there should not be any misunderstandings on this. This is not a signal of weakness from the Parliament. On the contrary, it is a signal of strength, the strength of those who believe in what they are defending and who feel they are supported by citizens.
The message is clear. Parliament is willing to negotiate, but it is united in its view that the European authorities must be equipped with sufficient powers to prevent future crises and to strengthen the single market. The ball is now firmly in the Council's court to come forward with the necessary compromises.
In February, Parliament rejected an agreement with the US which would have given them access to European bank transfer data to help combat terrorism. MEPs were concerned that data protection standards weren't being met. The rejection forced US and EU leaders to negotiate a new deal, which was approved by MEPs on Thursday.
The new agreement contains many of the improvements called for by Parliament. It creates a new post for a European supervisor who will be based in Washington and will monitor all data transfers which can take place only with the agreement of Europol, the European Law Enforcement Agency. They will ensure that any data transferred is kept to the minimum amount needed. It also foresees the deletion of data, with no data being held unnecessarily for more than 5 years. Europeans will have the right to seek the rectification, blocking or erasure of their personal data. The US has also promised to cooperate with an independent European terrorist finance tracking program, which the Commission will look to set up so that Europe doesn't rely only on the US for data extraction. Once in place, the agreement will fill a security gap that has seen leads on terrorist suspects go cold since February. But EPP Group MEPs stressed that it is a transitional agreement subject to review after 6 months. And only transfers made between EU member states and third countries, not those made within the borders of the EU, are covered. EPP Group spokesperson, Austrian MEP Ernst Strasser, spoke of the importance of the new agreement for Parliament.
Es ist ein großer inhaltlicher Erfolg.
It is a huge success because, thanks to the European Parliament, the idea of our own TFTP in Europe is now on the table. We need that to ensure we make progress here in Europe. I don't think we have achieved everything, but it's a good start, and I appreciate the good cooperation between Commission and Council, who moved considerably, and the political groups in Parliament.
Und innerhalb des Parlaments der politischen Gruppen.
Parliament and EU member states have had difficulties finding common ground on rights for bus and coach passengers. Proposals made by Parliament were rejected, but now Italian MEP Antonio Cancian has made a new attempt to restore the original scope of Parliament's proposals.
These include liability for carriers and rights for passengers in the event of accidents, delays and cancellations. But it is important to find the right balance between rights and an economically harsh reality for the business.
The work I've carried out in the recent months of negotiations, therefore, had two main objectives. First of all, not to penalize small and medium-sized enterprises, and secondly, to better defend and protect passengers, particularly those with disabilities or reduced mobility, to improve efficiency and to seek greater liability.
Co-modality is probably not an expression most Europeans are familiar with. In transport policy, however, co-modality refers to different means of transport modes on their own and in combination. The aim is to obtain an optimal and sustainable use of resources. This is the basis for proposals by Belgian MEP Mathieu Grosch, who wants to make sure transport modes are efficiently connected and funded.
Hauptbegriff ist rein wirtschaftlich bedingt, dass
One main idea is that all modes of transport in the future will have to provide a response to the question of mobility, whether it's for passenger transport or for goods transport. Efficient co-modality has of course an economical aspect, but also has to observe environmental and social and safety standards.
Hat auch den Aspekt, dass Effizienz auch nach den Kriterien der Umwelt, nach den Kriterien des Sozialen und auch nach den Kriterien der Sicherheit zu bewerten sind.
Grosch has set a number of targets to reduce deaths and injuries in road transport and to increase the number of passengers on public transports. He is also calling for reductions in CO2 emissions.
That's all from Parliament's summer session, but we'll be back in September with 2 EPP reports. To keep up to date in the meantime, visit our website eppgroup.eu. Thanks for watching.